Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope you're all recovered from the wind and the rain as we get into a gray Tuesday. My name is Patrick Sullivan, and I'm the CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be introducing some people today and starting off our session. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today from Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq people. And we want to acknowledge the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognize that we were all treaty people. A huge thank you to our sponsor of today's important conversation, Medavie Blue Cross, passionate supporters of mental health. The Halifax Chamber represents over now 1,800 businesses and over 68,000 employees in the greater Halifax area and beyond. 83% of these businesses are small businesses and entrepreneurs, but 100% of these people have mental health needs that need to be addressed and cared for. It's been a difficult last couple of years. Not that life isn't always a little difficult, but it's been exceptionally difficult as we've gone through a pandemic and are still sitting and learning about cases of COVID-19 every single day. So today, we're going to hear from a couple of experts on how we can take care of ourselves in the fast-paced world that values productivity and success. It's now my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Smith, Director of Group Life and Disability Services with Medavie Blue Cross. Rebecca, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, everyone, and I'm glad you could all be here this morning. On behalf of Medavie Blue Cross, we're happy to be part of today's discussion on mental health and the entrepreneurial mindset. As an organization whose mission is to improve the well-being of Canadians, we have a long history of working in mental health and ensuring our plan members have access to a variety of services and supports to help them receive the care they need when they need it. For those that might not know us, Medavie Blue Cross is an all-in-one carrier providing health, dental, travel, life, and disability benefits to members across Canada. We are part of Medavie, a health solutions partner, who also oversees Medavie Health Services, a healthcare delivery company, and the largest contracted provider of EMS in Canada. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen an increased impact on the physical and mental well-being of many Canadians. This is especially true for entrepreneurs who may have faced hardship and uncertainty, all while finding countless new ways to do business and support our local communities. We know that access to reliable mental health care has never been more important. Now more than ever, today's workforce is looking for flexible options and ease of access when it comes to services and supports to help them manage their mental health on the path to recovery while remaining at work. And that is why Medavie Blue Cross offers a variety of services and supports through its digital health platform, Connected Care, including digital therapies, online doctors, personalized medicine, and mindfulness practices. We're really looking forward to hearing from our panel of experts today on how we can improve mental health services and supports for entrepreneurs and small businesses. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenters. Karen Nichols is the Executive Director of the Canadian Mental Health Association, Nova Scotia Division. Karen has a deep compassion for those facing mental health and addiction issues and brings over 25 years of experience in both the for-profit and social impact sectors. Michael Devaney is an entrepreneur dedicated to opening minds and creating change. He regularly speaks to diverse audiences about his personal and professional mental health journey, recovery, hope, and the importance of prioritizing one's mental well-being in the workplace. Karen, over to you.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. I just wanted to start this conversation by giving you a little bit of information about CMHA Nova Scotia, because there's sometimes a lot of confusion about what we do. So we're kind of the most extensive community mental health organization in Canada. Our staff supports resilience, recovery, and well-being of people living with mental illness and those experiencing mental health challenges throughout our province in 36 communities. Through the programming and education and advocacy, we strive to create an environment of hope. We hope to reduce stigma and empower all of the Nova Scotians to flourish and thrive. So I want to start by thanking you, Rebecca, and your organization, Medavie Blue Cross, and the Chamber of Commerce for providing us with the platform and the space for this really, really important conversation. So, and I also invite you to reach out anytime to continue this conversation. It's one that needs to go on. November, as you may or may not know, is Men's Health Month, and it's when organizations around the globe highlight men's health with a focus on normalizing the conversations around mental health and the stigma that often prevents those who identify as men from seeking help. So for those of you who know Michael, you'll know him as an entrepreneur who's dedicated to opening the minds and creating change. And throughout his career, he's been lucky enough to be involved in a lot of projects, including the Mindset Project. It's the world's largest study of entrepreneurs, mental health, and decision making. He's also the founder of Work Insights, which is a Halifax-based consulting firm, and it's really focused on that intersection between entrepreneurship and wellness, which is a great place to really spend a little bit of time. So, you know, he is a mental health advocate. He speaks regularly to diverse audiences about his experiences, his lived experience, and the importance of prioritizing his mental health and well-being in the workplace. And so for those of you who are interested in deepening your understanding of Michael's lived experience, I would really encourage you to follow him on LinkedIn, where he shares the raw and real experience and perspective of someone who's living with mental illness every week. So as an entrepreneur who's coping with anxiety and depression, you know, I believe that Michael, you know, is familiar with the struggles and persisting stigma that men face, particularly in the workplace. And I think he'll bring a wonderful voice to our conversation today. So over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Karen. It's a great introduction. And as Karen had mentioned, I want to thank Rebecca at Medavie and also Patrick with the Chamber for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. And as Karen mentioned, this is really both personal and professional for me. I'm not in recovery. I have a form of complex PTSD, which results from childhood trauma. And it's something that I've had my entire life and I will continue to have. And the real focus for me is learning more and more how to manage that. I go through severe bouts of anxiety and also slide into depression at times. And I never quite know what's going to happen. My answer in the past was always to just work harder, to put in more hours. And as everyone knows, that's just distraction. It doesn't help. It actually made it much, much, much worse. About 7 years ago, I just hit a wall and it just got too much for me. I went into a really deep depression and actually ended up having to close my business at that time. And for every entrepreneur, you'd know how difficult that was. And I decided to take time off, but as an entrepreneur, that ended up being 2 months because I just couldn't not do anything. So I had to do something. And looking back, that was probably one of the things I wish I would have done differently, is take more time for myself. So I started the Mindset Project mainly because I felt there was something wrong with me. I felt that I was weak. I felt really ashamed of what had happened. And I wanted to know whether it was just me. And when we did the Mindset Project, I never understood at that time or appreciated it. We got 469 entrepreneurs to sit down for an hour and complete a survey. Looking back, I'm really quite impressed that we were able to get that. And the depth of data that came from there was incredible. The first thing for me, of course, being selfish, is that I was not alone. It's an incredibly prevalent issue for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs have a much higher incident rate of mental health than almost every other profession or form of work. So it's really, really important. I ended up doing a degree in positive psychology because I wanted to understand again How can I, make my own life better? And then somehow I ended up in developing a software company, which is not what I thought I'd be doing. But we look at measuring the working environment and how it impacts people and what we can do to really shape a much more positive way of working, which in the last 2 years has been something that's been very prevalent for people. So it's become my whole life, and both personally and professionally, like I said, and it's really meaningful today to have this conversation. And Karen and I are going to have a nice little chat and have questions from everybody. And just before we start, I wanted to give a few background pieces. And anybody that knows me knows I love slides and I like to talk. So it's always a dangerous combination, but I want to give just a little bit of background of where we are. For me, this is always a fascinating piece, that mental health should be the biggest connector we have. This is something we all share, but instead of bringing us together, I find mental health is the great divide. We simply can't talk about it, and it's something that we try to hide from others. In a typical year, 22 to 25% of Canadians will experience a mental health issue or a substance disorder. But in the last year, numbers from McKinsey & Company have showed that that has actually increased to about 41%. So we've almost seen a doubling of the number of people that are hitting the incident rate of mental illness. And for many of those people, they're not aware of what is actually going on. It's really new to them. So it's very difficult. So why is this happening? In a word, stigma. Stigma is the biggest issue around mental health today. 80% of employees feel there's stigma in the organization. 75% of leaders agree there is. And sadly, only about 23% of leaders are actually doing anything about it. So it's there, we know it, and yet we let it stay. The challenge with stigma is it's all about shame. It's about prejudice, about discrimination towards people with a mental health condition. It means that we're viewed very differently from those that have other chronic health issues like diabetes. If I cracked my knee, I could talk about it at work. If I was falling into a depression, there's no way I can have that conversation without feeling very uncomfortable. What happens is it affects, again, our interpersonal interactions. It excludes us from being around people. It takes us away from being involved in projects, which is a huge issue. These two numbers just stunned me when I saw them a few months ago, and I just cannot get over them. 73% of employees would choose not to work with a colleague living with a mental illness. That means 3/4 of the people would prefer not to work with me. 55, boy, they don't know what they're missing either. That's all I can say. 55% of employees would choose not to work with a colleague recovering from a mental illness. So this is the stigma that's out there. And when we leave it alone, it transitions quickly to discrimination. And that discrimination, of course, leads to lack of access. And we just don't have the support we need. So it really amplifies the situation. And sadly, we also know that more than a third of people, 37% exactly, will not seek treatment because of that. So because of the fear of the stigma, they hide it, which makes it even worse. So to me, this is everyone's concern. This is something that should bring us all together. And there's no such thing as health overall unless we have mental health. But there is something that's going on right now that's remarkable. We have an unbelievable opportunity to really shape the culture we have and do that in a very healthy way. For entrepreneurs, taking care of yourself is the first step. It's always essential because that's really how you set your mindset in terms of what you bring to the company. And this to me has always been difficult. And this slide really shows to me the way entrepreneurs, and most people, to be honest, work, is that on the left-hand side is really how most of us think. I know that's the way I usually do, is that no matter where we are, we really look to where we need to be or where we feel we should be. We always have these expectations of what should be ahead. So rather than feeling the sense of success of where we've come from, we're constantly looking at how far we need to go. So we live in this gap and we're never going to get there because that horizon just keeps on extending beyond where we are. On the other side, if we can sit and actually look at where we came from, so instead of looking at where we're going, and it's always good to have goals, but if we actually balance it out with looking at the progress we've made, we start thinking about how far we've come and what we've actually done with our life. And this is something that makes a huge difference. And sadly, this is something that entrepreneurs simply do not do very often. We're always looking at what is the next piece we have to do. And it really makes a lot of sense for us to take some time and appreciate where we've come from. So for entrepreneurs, we're just in a world of ongoing worry. That's all there is. There's always change. There's always uncertainty. The biggest issues are how do we respond to it? What we found in the research is there's really three pieces that entrepreneurs experience. One is a loss of independent identity. So anyone who has a business knows that I am the business is me. So it becomes very personal. There's actually no other type of profession where there's such a melding or molding of who we are and what we do. So for an entrepreneur, the business is never away. So anything that happens with the business is deeply personal. There's a feeling of loss of confidence, mainly because we set such high expectations for ourselves that we're constantly trying to run to get to them, and we never quite get there. And there's never an opportunity that we say no to. There's never a timeline. Oh no, we can do that. Wondering in our mind how we ever going to get there. But we set that up, and of course that continues to eat away at our confidence. Then there's this loss of control. So oddly enough, most entrepreneurs are very short-term focused. We talk about these great visions that entrepreneurs have, and we do, but we get really caught up in the short term and what we have to do. So we feel this loss of control of where we're trying to go because we focus so much on what's in front of us. The big number that came out of our study was that 63% or 2/3 of all entrepreneurs will experience a mental illness during the working years. And other research that's happened since the Mindset Project has borne that out, that about 2/3 of entrepreneurs will experience a mental illness. What is challenging too is it affects almost all parts of our life because of that melding of who we are in our business. So about 70% of people said it affected their ability to work, 75% said it affected their social life, and 75% said it affected their relationships. Most entrepreneurs will isolate more than any other in terms of dealing with a mental health issue because we simply can't let people know. If investors find out, if customers find out, if the team finds out, we're the ones who are coming in. We have to run the business, make sure everything is working. And if people start questioning us, we simply can't allow that, or that's what's in our mind. So we put incredible pressure, and the feeling is no one is going to understand. A few years ago, as Karen said, I started writing, and I used to write the posts about a week or so ahead. And then I thought, who cares? I'm just going to write what it's like. And there's up weeks, there's down weeks, it's all over the place. So I started writing them. So if anybody reads my posts, I write them about an hour before I put them out there. And it's one of those things that who knows what I'm going to say, because it's just like talking to me, actually. Who knows what's going to come out of me? But it's real. It's actually what it's going through. And what's been fascinating is how it's actually picked up a much deeper conversation with a lot of people. What I do find interesting is that not a lot of people will comment on LinkedIn where I do post, but I get a lot of private messages and a lot of private emails. So that just tells you that the stigma is there, that we can't have this conversation. We talked about resilience, and Rebecca had mentioned that this one thing that we look at is how resilient are we? This is numbers that we track through the work we do with clients. What we found is that the overall level of resilience still is around 73%. So people are still feeling like they can handle it. And what we see is where we feel the most resilient is in terms of our competency and our connection. So being around people. The pandemic has brought us closer to those that we're most involved with. But what's happening is you'll see a number in red, that our composure level is now at about 49%, which means we're now questioning whether or not we can actually handle it anymore and whether we can keep it in. And then the second one is coping. So those two are becoming big issues. They used to be much higher, but as the years progressed that we've been measuring working environments, the numbers have declined quite dramatically. What we're also seeing is there's this 12%, this outlier group of entrepreneurs who have really successful businesses and really healthy lives. And my first thought was, what is wrong with them? That is just not normal. So what we wanted to look at is, instead of like, what's wrong with them? What are they doing that's right? And we found that in the 12%, it was like a 95% rate. All of them did these 5 things. They exercised, they spoke with the people around them, they meditated, they slept well, and they said no to things more often. These things just sound so common sense, but yet they're far from it because most of us don't do it. So these 5 things were something that almost everybody in that 12% group did. and it's something that we can learn from. Strategies for moving ahead. Biggest thing, again, is like for yourself, take time for your relationships. I found with the businesses I've had in the past, I would dedicate myself to the business and put myself fully into it to the extent that I would not be there for other people. That's something I've changed, and that's been a really positive difference in my life. So keeping close to the people around you and keeping time for friends, incredibly important. And take time for yourself to actually do things that energize and renew you. That's the biggest thing you can do. I've sat for hours some days trying to make myself work on something. And I'm sure everyone out there's done the same thing, that you've got some type of deadline, you've got something coming up and you've got to get this done, but yet your head's just not in the game. And I've pushed myself and pushed myself. Now, I do a little bit, but most times I know what's happening and I just get out. I find getting outside is probably the best thing I can do. And I can get out for a hike, go out for a bike, go down by the water, do whatever I want. But I find the biggest thing we can do is really help ourselves by taking care of our own selves first, and we can help others. And that has a huge impact because as entrepreneurs, we are that horrible word bosses with people, no matter what other way we want to look at it. And the impact that we have on others is huge. This is another piece of research that really floored me. This is from McKinsey. What it showed is that overall life satisfaction, 25% of it is made up of the job that we have or the work that we do. And when we look at the drivers of work satisfaction, of job satisfaction, but 40% or the bulk of it is interpersonal relationships. The one relationship that has the most impact is with the person who you report to. So the owner of the company or your supervisor. 86% of your satisfaction in your working life is due to the relationship you have with the person you report to. So as an entrepreneur, we have an outsized impact on the people who work with us. And it's really important that we take care of ourselves so that impact is positive. When I closed a company down a number of years ago, I found out from the team, who were incredible people. They stayed with me until we actually closed the company and didn't go to other jobs until that time. But we also were really open and honest with each other, which I wished we had done before, I had done before. And a lot of people said that they could tell the mood I was in when I walked through the door, that it was written all over my face. And our receptionist said she would email people to let them know what I was like when I walked in. And she said, we always had those D&C days. And I said, what's a D&C day? She said, duck and cover. It just meant that, you had that look on your face. It was not going to be a good day. And that is something I really look back on with regret is, by hiding what was going on, I definitely wasn't keeping it away from impacting people. And today with the team I have now, it's really open. We share everything. And the last thing I want is for one of them to feel that they've done something because of a move that I made. So I find I just am really open about where I'm at, so everyone knows, and we work really well. What's been rewarding is they share as well. So I also know where they're at. So it's made for a much, much better environment for working. For all of us, stigma remains that primary issue. It's the biggest thing that faces our overall mental health. And what is stigma? There's really three parts to it. There's a self-stigma that we have, that we're actually ashamed that we have this. It makes us feel weak, that we're broken or damaged, and we just don't want to talk about it. Then there's the public stigma, the way people see others with mental health issues, and your fear of being outed, and you want to isolate and not let people know that you're experiencing it. There's also structural stigma. There's a lot of workplace practices that are really against the protection of mental health. And we have yet to get to a place where mental health is on the same level as all other type of health issues. And that's something we have to do. One of the things that really gives me hope is that despite this incredible level of stigma and the fact that we know it, 79% or 80% of employees feel an awareness campaign would reduce it. So what it comes down to is something really simple. If we just talk about it, we can actually dissipate it, and we can actually fight it and make it a much healthier place. So the impact can be profound, particularly in this environment where we're looking at new ways of working. Are we going to go back to the office or not? What's it going to be like? Who do we talk to? So the paradox is, of course, is when we need the most help and talk about it, we don't. And the whole part of a mental illness is that it's typically invisible, so other people can't see it and probably don't see it as important. So there's something we really have to work with. When we're looking at what we do as employers, it's really making clear that mental health is a priority. It's looking at how do we, take care of the barriers that are keeping people from getting the care they need. Like, how often do we talk about it every day? How do we reduce stigma throughout the organization? How do we measure and get feedback about doing that? The first step, and this is very shameless, it's to measure the experience of the employees themselves. Measure, understand, and make informed decisions using data. I'm a guy that loves data because with data, we can talk about things we wouldn't normally talk about. If I can have a company of engineers talk about feelings using data, we can talk about anything. And no offense to engineers. It's just putting the data out there so we actually understand what's going on and what's happening. So for organizations, the 4 big strategies that we see making the most sense is really focusing on awareness and shifting that perception of what mental illness and addiction is, and understanding that it's something that's everyone's problem. And a literacy training program would go a long ways. Eliminating discriminatory behavior, making sure that people are not taking off projects, are not taking off cases because of their mental health issues. Making sure we have a parity of mental and physical health benefits. And really, more than anything else, this is huge, putting an executive or a leader in charge of it. A lot of times I find what happens is that we delegate it. No, we need to see people at the top actually open up about it. When people say, what is the thing we can do most, is talk. When I see leaders who always say, like, our environment supports mental health, but they never talk about their own, that tells me that no one in the organization is ever going to take advantage of those benefits, because if they see a leader who is not saying they have their issues, then no one else wants to admit it because they don't want to appear weak. So that's something I clearly feel very strongly about, that leaders need to step up and actually talk about where they're at. You don't have to share everything and use your organization as a therapist, but you do have to, in my mind, be open about, I too deal with anxiety, or I have a son or daughter or someone around me who is also working through this. It makes us human and it brings us together. On the individual side, relationships first and foremost. That's who we need around us. It's people we can trust and we know they care about us. Take time to do the things that energize and renew us. Things I would never have done in the past because I had to work. Now I do these first so I can work. Looking for the strengths that help us contribute the most and how we do that, and make sure we understand the meaning of what's there. So that to me is really the background of what we're talking about today. And I will stop with the slides and try to turn this over to Karen so we can have a conversation about them. And as always, I'm always more than happy to talk about pretty much everything. So I'm going to close this and then we'll have a little chat and see what we talk about.
Thanks, Michael. I think what I love and appreciate about the time I spend with you is that wonderful intersection between data and emotion, and it is really important, and we need to pay attention to it and let it inform us in terms of how we move forward and make changes that are impactful both for ourselves and our lives and the people that we work with. One of the things I was curious about was when you were doing your research, what was the data point that shocked you or moved you, to kind of really stand up and pay attention on the impact of stigma and mental health in the workplace? And then what would you see as the sort of antidote to that? You've covered off some of the issues, I think, really well in your slide show, but what would you say would be the antidote to that particular data point?
The one data point that hit me the most was the 63%. So yeah, 2/3 of entrepreneurs will face some form of mental health issue during their lifetime. There's other research that backs up that 49% of entrepreneurs actually come from families where there's a first degree relationship, or brother, sister, mother, father, who has a mental health condition. So it's almost like we're more likely to have mental health issues, and we put ourselves into a very high pressure environment. And the thing that can make the biggest difference is the thing we never do, which is to talk. We simply don't want people to know there might be some risk with the way that we're thinking. And when I started writing, really honestly, the posts on Sunday, I worried about how clients or potential clients might think about it. Boy, it's been anything but what I thought. Like, people have been incredibly supportive, have been saying how much, like, I'm writing about things that happened to them too. So what I found is that by, opening up and being honest, that's been the biggest thing I could have done. And that, we can move that 63% number down if we make it okay. And entrepreneurs feel that they're supposed to persevere, they're supposed to have grit, like all this thing that's out there about what entrepreneurs are like. Entrepreneurs are human. And they're under a lot of pressure. So being able to talk openly, I think, is the biggest thing we can do.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, when I read your posts on the weekend, I'm reminded of this great quote by Marianne Williamson, which speaks to, when you shine your light and when you show, I'm paraphrasing greatly, but when you show your vulnerability, you give other people permission to do the same. And I think that is such a gift and such a, it's courageous for sure. But I think the more we normalize those kinds of conversations, the more it becomes normal for everyone to have those conversations. So I think what you say, it's such a small thing, but such a powerful thing at the end of the day, right?
No question. And then but there's still people around us that we've, like, what I found probably the most surprising aspect of being so open about my mental health is how people respond. There are people who simply can't handle it. And sadly for me, that's mainly been family. So at some point you have to decide, are you going to be around people who are honestly going to be toxic for you, or do you pull back? And that's something I've written about, because I've really removed myself from family to a great extent, simply because it wasn't a good situation. These are decisions that should be made, by the way, with a mental health professional. But having those conversations when you're on the other side and someone's coming to you talking about their mental health challenges, the biggest thing you can do is simply listen. I find too many times people want to try to fix you. So they try to jump to a solution, and it's made with the best intention, but you're just telling me I'm broken. If you tell me you've got a solution and you can fix me, you just told me I'm broken and damaged. So that's not good. If you tell me everyone else is going through the same thing, you just discounted what I'm dealing with. So I think when we're having those conversations, what's important too is to just ask questions and listen. You don't have to solve any problem. Just be there.
Yeah. Be curious and be kind.
Yeah, very much.
And compassionate as well. Yeah, I agree. So when I think about, the entrepreneurs in my life, what I think about when it comes to mental health is sort of that dissonance that happens between, what they're experiencing when they, there's this tremendous pressure to keep the lights on, to keep the team employed, keep investors happy. And then what they're really feeling inside, which is this, perceived weakness and being totally vulnerable. And so that dissonance is, to me, what creates the pain for entrepreneurs. And so how much do you think that contributes to their state of mental health? And in your experience, what's the best way to kind of start to address that dissonance?
That's huge. And when I remember a situation where I was going to do a presentation, and I was with Brian, who works with me. And when we were in the elevator, I was just saying, like, I'm dealing with so much crap right now outside of this. Like, I just have so much bearing down on me. I just don't feel good. And like, he was getting a little bit worried about what this is going to be like. And he said, it was absolutely amazing. He said, it's like you change personalities when you get off the elevator. He said, you suddenly became outgoing, you became very funny and telling stories and connecting. And I said, because I put the armor on. And I think that's what we do too often as entrepreneurs, is we put the armor on. So we know we have to come off a certain way, which is confident, personable. We see what's happening. We've got something to bring to people. So that's something we do a lot, and it creates a lot of the dissonance that you talked about.
Yeah.
It makes us really concerned about, can we even talk to an investor about experiencing depression and having severe bouts of anxiety.
Yeah.
Sadly, I would say we can't. The investment community has not moved very well with the mental health needs of entrepreneurs. And that's something I think we really need to talk about, is how do we put entrepreneurs into an environment that's better for them. The irony of being an entrepreneur is that we do that because we want to be our own boss, but yet we live by everybody else's rules or expectations of us, and not how we want to. And that just wears on us over time. And people I talk to are really successful, so they deal with anxiety all the time. And so that, to me, how can we correct it? It's correcting this view of entrepreneurs, like this Dragon's Den effect of what an entrepreneur is supposed to be like. And it's not giving us too much room to be human, when we're supposed to be constantly pitching and constantly on and having this grit and perseverance, and all these things. It just doesn't give us much room to be ourselves. And then when we go home, we're exhausted. So can we talk to the people around us? Probably not. So this is one area where I don't think we've done a good job, and I don't have a great answer for you, because I think the system has to change, which is how we see entrepreneurs and how we actually work as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think that's huge, and I think there's probably many more conversations like this to follow with lots of people, so that gradually over time that perception will break down, and we can rebuild it in a more humanistic and human-centered approach to all of this.
Well, I'll close to it, Karen, with a comment that I know won't be popular, but I'll make it anyway because I believe it. I think the startup community is really the foundation of mental health issues for most entrepreneurs. I just think it's incredibly ill-structured, I'll put it that way. And it could be done so much better, both for the human condition of the entrepreneurs in that system, and also for the actual survival of those businesses and their ability to scale. I just think the way we're doing it now is completely and utterly wrong.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you would do if you had the ability to have input and impact?
What would be really nice is if we actually paid the entrepreneur a base income. So entrepreneurs that go into any entrepreneur, whether in a startup program or not, there's such a heavy financial pressure because we don't have a salary. We have to try to find a way through it. And most of these platforms and programs don't provide for pay for the entrepreneur. If you're willing to invest in the idea that an entrepreneur has, go a bit further and invest in the entrepreneur as a person. If they could take away that one worry about how am I going to pay my bills, how am I going to protect my family, whatever age I'm at, that would make a huge shift. And I've seen the way that we've invested money, both from a government perspective and from private perspective, hasn't been entirely smart. So I think one of the more intelligent routes would be, if we're investing in a business, we should invest in the person who is starting that business and giving them the room. Like maybe it's a 3-year investment that you make. And my feeling is that if you had an entrepreneur who didn't have to think about their financial well-being for 3 years, they would be able to do amazing things. That's my thought.
What sectors do you feel are maybe on the leading edge of some of this conversation and sort of starting to change the conversation overall?
Tech companies talk a lot about it. Whether they do it's another question. I think there's more talk. I guess that's one of the challenges. I think there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action. One of the stats that came from that McKinsey study was that only 23% of organizational leaders are actually doing anything, and even that 23% is made up of, no offense, but getting a Fitbit. That's not really a mental health program. So I think this is going to change dramatically in the next year because the impact of the pandemic. I mean, the incident rate of mental health issues was going up anyway, like all other trends that are coming from the pandemic. It was there before. The pandemic really amplified it and sped it up. So now we're seeing a much higher incident rate. And I think we're going to have to look at opening up these conversations. But, you know, sadly, my answer is I don't really see sectors or areas that are really leading the way. I think there's a lot of talk. There's definitely some companies that are doing well at it individually, but I don't think it's something we've done very well.
So we need more exemplars to really create a movement almost to focus on this issue.
Yeah. Like, I mean, again, it starts with conversations. And if we had those senior leaders talking about it, that would make a huge difference.
You talked about, how many business owners, probably that dissonance is what creates a lot of the anxiety that comes from being a business owner. How important is it to realize when that anxiety is becoming a potentially chronic health issue? Was there a moment of truth for you where it was sort of like, crap, this is not going well. I have to do something about it. And what was that,
Well, I ignored the moment of truth. So the moment of truth happened when I was like 34. I thought I had a heart attack. My left arm went limp. I had huge chest pains and fell on the floor. And all I was thinking about is I've got to get a proposal done. Like, I've got to find a way to crawl out of here and, get to the desk and get this proposal done. I ended up being taken to the hospital later that day. I actually went to work. That should have been the moment of truth, because when they did the EKGs, the technicians said, is there some way that you could calm down enough so that we could get a clear reading? She said, like, the lines are so blurred, like you're just so tense. I'm thinking, if I knew how to stop being so tense, we wouldn't be here. But that was the moment of truth, but I did nothing about it. In fact, we started another business at that time because my business partner, I felt I needed something new to take my attention. But the real moment of truth happened when I would have been 53, 54. And I had a blackout. So for me, what I have are these really intense anxiety attacks to the point that I actually black out. And I don't even know when it's happening, what's going on. I'll feel something in the back of my neck and then I'm out. And there's some type of, I forget what they're called, but they're just a really intense reaction to anxiety. So some people have panic attacks, which I certainly do, but I actually black out and lose consciousness. So when that happened, that was enough to scare me. So I ended up going to the mood disorder clinic and started down the road. I've been to therapists for years, and I found going to group therapy was probably one of the first things that opened my mind, like hearing other people have the same problem. But then when I met my current therapist, who I've been with for over 6 years, I don't think I'm allowed to say it, but anyway, his name's Brad. But Brad has been incredible for me. Like he was the first person who was able to ask the right questions to get me to unload everything that I'd been holding back for so many years. And that's when everything changed for me.
Very good. It's the talking bit again, getting it kind of from out of your head and heart and out into the open to be able to process it in a way that's healthy, I guess.
Yeah, very much. And I guess one thing I wanted to say too is, like, when I'm talking about like the way things are for me, I've also spent 20 years as a consultant to entrepreneurs. So I worked with more than 1,000 different entrepreneurs. So I have I guess, a really unique and incredible perspective in seeing how entrepreneurs work. And I've really appreciated that. I have my own experience, but that's also what I write about is colored by what I see other people going through. And I just wish I just really hope other people don't go through what I have gone through.
Yeah. when you were in your slide presentation, when you were talking about the, you know, the near term and long term goals and the pressure we put on ourselves to, you know, achieve those goals, it seems to me that entrepreneurs, I mean, that's what makes an entrepreneur essentially, is really having that vision and those goals. And they seem sort of counterproductive to sort of maintaining a focus on your own sort of health, because you're always sort of that future focused. You're not sort of saying, you know, right now it's not feeling great, and what do I do about it? And so how can entrepreneurs sort of temper that and kind of create a reality that you know, allows them to sort of look after themselves, you know, while being able to kind of honor those, you know, because I do believe it's a bit of a drive, it's a bit of, you know, the DNA of an entrepreneur. And so how do you reconcile those two things?
Right. Yeah. So I also realized I never answered the last question. When do you know it's getting bad? Negative rumination. To
Okay.
me,
Okay.
That's the heads up, is that
Yeah.
everyone worries, everyone has pressures. It's all about how we respond to stress. When you start ruminating
Okay.
negatively and letting that fly, you're going down a bad road. You're now into anxiety. It's going to start continuing into like a type of burnout. So sorry, I had to go back and answer that.
No, and I kind of felt that you were illustrating it in many different ways. So thanks for the stories, and thanks for the answer again. So
yeah, so this question is
yeah, so the question really was around, you were talking about the goals and how the long term and short term, and so how do you reconcile that kind of that drive? Because like there is a piece of DNA that makes an entrepreneur, and that focus on those goals and achieving those goals with like being in the moment and really focusing on your own health, you know, so that you can actually achieve those goals.
I think right now it's probably even amplified again, because we're all worried about the future and what's going to come ahead of us. And I know as an entrepreneur, I worry about covering payroll. I worry about keeping everything running. And I have to have goals because that does keep me going and keep me heading to where we need to be. One of the challenges that we face, oddly enough, is what I call opportunity syndrome. Like, I've never seen an opportunity I didn't like.
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to talking. Entrepreneurs typically tend to isolate and build out opportunities on their own. What I have found is by sharing the opportunities with my own team, they have a much better perspective than I do on, yeah, that's not worth it, or that's not going to work. And it's something I have to keep checking in on. But, you know, I've done so much work with other companies on strategy. It's mainly having a really clear sense of purpose of what it is you're trying to do and why is that important, and keeping that in front of you so that when you're looking at opportunities, does it actually move the purpose forward or not? Or is it something that's just going to take you off course? And I would say to the greatest extent, most of them take you off course. So I think the biggest thing is to really look at, you know, pulling back from the personalization of the goals to look at strategically, okay, this is the purpose of what we're trying to do. This is where we're trying to go. Does this fit? And you can even ask this like incredible question, is it reasonable in that timeline? Because entrepreneurs typically put a lot of pressure on themselves to do things in much shorter time frames. We're supposed to pull things off all the time. So all we do is just put more and more pressure on ourselves. So to a great extent, it's, you know, trying to find that way of balancing enough opportunity, making sure it fits and within reasonable timelines, and having the help that you need to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, and understanding the kind of the skills and competencies that your team brings to it, and not be afraid to allow them to lean into that as well, right?
Well, let your team work with you. Like, you know, don't try to do everything. Like, that's always been one of my problems from the past, is that I'll take everything on. I'm the martyr. Like, I'll do everything. I'll work the whole weekend. Don't worry about it. But that doesn't give a good picture for everybody on the team. So what I find is that the more the team pushes me to be open about, you know, what I need and how they can be helped, it really does make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's great. It's about letting go too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of control of self and other and this situation. Yeah.
Yeah, makes me shiver thinking about it.
Yeah. It makes a lot of us shiver. Part of what you were saying earlier on reminds me a lot about the experience I've been having, and I'm sure many people have been having in their own organizations, and that is with the onset of COVID. We all became more and more aware of our own kind of the thin line, of mental wellness and how we move up and down that continuum. And as we experienced the isolation and everything that went along with it, we suddenly became aware of the fact that, we're pretty vulnerable at the end of the day. And what I noticed in, my workplace was that we were more willing to have those kinds of conversations. We tried to lean into them a little more and really acknowledge when people were having a bad day or feeling, not on their game, and giving permission for that to be okay. I'm curious about, and we've talked about it a little bit in the past, but and you've talked about, your experience as an entrepreneur who's trying to, you're creating this new business, but you're also trying to create it with this new lens around being more human and acknowledging that we are all just messy human beings trying to do the best we can. And how do there's always tension there really between the ability to, you and I talked about, we're boomers, right? And so we've been brought up in this sort of, mantra of you got to work hard, you got to, put in the face time, you got to, put in 80 hours a week, and only then you prove your worth. And becoming more human in the way human centric in the way that we operate really means that we have to let go of some of that stuff. And what are some of the practices that you are experimenting with that have been difficult for you to kind of, it's about that letting go piece, but creating that safe place for these good conversations to happen, and to move forward as an organization that does pay attention to these things. So what are those conversations, and what do they look like, and where's the tension for you?
This is a big area of tension, is trying to figure out how much to drive and how much to give myself some space. And this I find very difficult. The only person I have no compassion for is myself. I will give myself absolutely no room whatsoever. And I was amazed to find out when I was talking to a friend of mine that I always think we all have these voices in our heads that tell us things. And, mine's a masochist. It treats me horribly. And he was saying, well, mine will say, you can do it. I said, really? That is not what I hear. Is like, I hear you're going to fail, you're going to lose, you're going to deserve this, like all those things. And this is the biggest problem I have, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, is being self-compassionate, and it's trying to find ways to do that. Interestingly, what's worked for me is I have a couple friends who are also entrepreneurs, and we almost serve as compassion posts for each other, and we'll call each other back and forth. And I had a chat with one of them, and I immediately said, well, you should back off from your board positions. Like, you should take some time. And like, that just made immediate sense to me, and had to really work that through and went from there. And then on the other side, I had the reverse conversation a couple weeks later. And the comment the person made was like, well, you should back off of some of those opportunities. Why didn't I see that? How come I can see it so quickly in someone else, but not for me? And that's where I don't know about some of these entrepreneurial peer groups. I don't think we're completely honest when we're in those groups. We're always trying to I always say there's always a 20% buffer. We always add 20% to what we're actually doing just to make it sound better. I find the real conversations are with people who are friends. So I've definitely got friends who are entrepreneurs that I can have those conversations with, and they're very much, yeah, you're full of crap. You can actually say it. and not in a nicer way, but well, sometimes not. But anyway,
Hmm.
you can have that honest conversation. But I do think one of the bigger challenges for entrepreneurs is finding that self-compassion for yourself. And that is something I struggle with constantly, like because of my background, and I'm a little bit different where, I suffered a lot of abuse as a child, and that shut me down. So I carried a lot of shame about what happened to me. And it's only been in the last number of years that I, figured out that, how can a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid be responsible for those things?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, for me, it's realizing, I'm not to blame. And then on a business perspective, that to give yourself some room, like I took last night off. That's something I don't do. And I was talking to this friend of mine, and her comment was like, why don't you just take the night off? Like, you're allowed, like you can do that. Am I allowed doing that? Really? Like, I should be working, I should be doing something. But it's almost like I pushed myself to take the night off. And it was really nice. Like, it was a
Enjoyed
great,
it. Yeah.
yeah, it was a rainy night. Although the guilt was there, like, oh, I should have gone in for, like, I should have been outside somehow, even though I would get hit with a limb. But I mean, it's just trying to give yourself that room, and it's really tough. So it's finding people that are entrepreneurs like you, and that you can have that really honest conversation with. I think that's key.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm curious about too, because I imagine that there will be entrepreneurs in the audience that say it's nice to think that we could create this space, but how do you keep running a business, and give other people the space to feel safe and all of that. So I know we've had some conversations around when you're working with your current team, and sometimes there's some challenges, and how do you navigate those, because it doesn't necessarily feel like the normal way of doing things, but it's probably the better way of doing things. So as a leader within your organization, how do you manage that tension?
Like you said, giving up a little bit, quite a bit. In the past, I would definitely have been a control freak. I think we all have that inclination to try to control the things around us, and unfortunately that tends to be people at times. And I always said I had an open door policy, and someone was really honest with me one day and said, well, we don't come in because you always have the answer, like you don't let us talk. And that was a real eye-opener. With the team I have now, I have no choice. I absolutely love working with millennials, because like, it's just questioning me constantly. And it's to understand and to see how we can do something, not like questioning me. And what I love is that what we're creating is what we are creating. It's not something that I've done. Like, it's not about me. It's about what we're trying to do with the business. And I find that would be my advice. The more entrepreneurs can share their business with the people who work with them, the more it will work. And interestingly, by doing that, it's also way more profitable. It grows more effectively. And there's more sense to it, in the sense of like, we're doing things that are purposeful and intentional rather than opportunistic. But it's a big step. But I find, for me, we have this really creative environment that we can work in. And that makes a big difference for me. I love the work environment in right now.
So if I were to talk to your team, how would they describe it, that working environment? How would they?
Open.
That culture. Yeah.
Open, honest, creative, innovative. I am really focused on the outcome. I used to try to manage how you did things, because I thought I knew better. I've stopped that. And luckily, by going into an area that I knew nothing about, was really effective, because I couldn't tell a programmer how they should do it, because I have no idea. Or someone who's a designer, like I don't have any clue. So I found, by focusing on the outcome and just letting people work in a way that fits them, I know Brian worked last night until midnight. I feel bad that he worked that time, but on the other hand, like, he'll probably take time off today or do something different. And the funniest thing we made the shift on is with the pandemic is like them calling me to see if it's okay if they took the day, to just get a break. You don't have to call me.
Yeah.
Like, you can't. The answer is yes. We've got these things that we're working towards. This is the goal that we want to see, the outcome we need. How you get there, up to you. And I found that has made, for such a really enjoyable culture.
Was that hard to do?
Horribly hard. The first, the first 2 years were really tough. The last 2 have been really, really nice. So, and nothing changed except for me.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, huh? Yeah, and there's just a level of trust in yourself and in your team that you have to really become comfortable with.
Oh, like, I think, that's a big comment you just hit on, is that one of the side effects of having a mental illness is that and maybe that's just from my background, but I don't trust easily. So I expect people to hurt me somewhere along the way. Mm. So I'm really lucky that I had one team member who just, pushed me to the wall and was really open and honest and said, like, you don't talk to us, about how things are going until you feel something has gone wrong. And he said, like, you have to be honest with us and let us know if we're not doing things the way, or not getting to where you want us to be, and have these conversations. And I thought that was a turning point. That was probably the turning point for me in terms of how all of us work together, is that I had to stop this inherent lack, like almost suspicious that someone will do something, and just start trusting. Like, trust that they care about the business, trust that they care about their work, which they do, and have the confidence that they're going to do what's needed for the business, which they do. So that's something I just don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah. But it's almost as if you have to exercise that muscle, over time to kind of become confident in operating that way.
Yeah. No. I'm like, as you can be aware, like, I'm always open. But there's still a part of me that sometimes questions how people will receive it. But I figure I'm gonna just go ahead anyway. This is a conversation that needs to happen, and I'm gonna have it. So.
Yeah. So let's just sort of take that one step further and go back to some of your research, and kind of tie it all back in a nice little loop. What is it that you think we can do as leaders? Because, as you said, we have the responsibility to kind of co-create a healthy culture within our organizations. What are the tangible things that you can do, or we can do, to create that safe space and the impact to reduce the stigma in the workplace? And I know you had a list that you referred to as well, but as someone who's sort of maybe listening in today and they want to go back to their organizations and really kind of start to move the bar on this conversation, what are the things that they could do that would really make impact?
The biggest thing is always the conversation, to have that conversation. It's challenging at first, and this is why, and this is a shameless plug, but we do analytics on the working environment, and I find by doing a confidential survey, you will get honest answers. So I always think the first step is to understand the context of the organization. If we have this, if there's 10 of us and we all sit in the room, probably no one's going to say, oh, it's like, I'm really experiencing some challenges here. Like, if no one else is going to step up first.
Right.
So I think having a measure of the environment to understand the context honestly is really important. And the second thing, I think, and I've mentioned it before, is for the entrepreneur to be honest as well, or the leader to be honest and say, I know we're experiencing this, turbulent, changeable world, and there's just so many worries about what the future is going to be like, and go that one step further and say, like, I'm worried as well. Like, you know, I feel anxiety at times about this, this, and this. You know, I keep looking at where we're going and I see the opportunity, but I think it's just natural that we're all going to feel some level of anxiety. You know, do you feel the same way? Asking how people feel, listening to the answer. Don't jump on, okay, well, then we should do this. Like, 'cause that's an entrepreneur. Oh, then we should be doing this. Like, you know, just stop, listen, hear what people are saying, let them actually tell you what they think should be done, what would help, because they do know what would help them. But that's, I mean, it keeps coming back to that same piece, like being able to have a meaningful conversation. First, I think you need to have the data and context, understand what it is like in the working environment, what the experience is. That can lead into a discussion from there. That's more open and honest, and then people can talk about it. But I think first and foremost, the leader has to share who they are too.
And what a gift that is, really, at the end of the day.
It makes, you know, we always talk about entrepreneurs being inspirational, motivational, all these things. I think if you actually are human, it makes you even more so. I'll connect way better with you if you actually talk about where you're at. And I've been in rooms before where I've talked to groups of CEOs and leaders, and you know, I know a lot of them, and I know most of them are on. Everyone in that room has their problems, but yet we all try to pretend that we don't. And it's just like, it's just stop, like just stop. And I think it would make a much better way of working for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's the, you know, I think in some ways it's very simple, and it's just showing up in that very vulnerable and honest way that says, I don't know all the answers, you know, I'm having a bad day, or any of those things, because it gives people permission to kind of be as real as possible, you know, in the same situation. So
that's a big piece right there. Even if you just start with saying, I'm having a bad day, it would stop people from wondering what they did. Because if you suddenly like bluster into the room where you're short and abrupt with people, those things can be misinterpreted. And I had a chat with a CEO a number of years ago, and her answer was, it was one of the best I've ever had. And I asked her, what has changed the most? Or what change have you seen the most since becoming CEO? And she said, if I wear a red hat on Monday, on Thursday, 4 people will be wearing red hats. She said, I never understood how what I do is watched so closely.
Powerful.
And I thought that was such a great comment, because it really was an eye-opener that you may think people don't notice, but they certainly do. And particularly if you're the entrepreneur leading the company, or if you're the CEO or in a senior role, people are watching. And, you know, that's not to make it, you feel, you know, overly responsible, but it's also a real encouragement to be open.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I think we're at the stage where I can flip into the chat to see if we have any questions for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Hit
Hold
me.
on a second here. Yeah, yeah. Okay. This is a good one. Is there a spread between men and women that are impacted by mental illness as entrepreneurs? Have you been able to do any research into that area, or anecdotally know?
Yeah, so the research that we did, we published 8 different reports. Interestingly, we never published the gender report. But what we found is that men are more than likely to have mental health issues as entrepreneurs. Women are, in the research, women were more likely to talk to others and to share where they're at. And they were also, I love this one, more likely to make thoughtful decisions. Whereas men were more likely to hide what was going on, which of course amplifies it. So the long answer is that in our research, and also what I've seen from McKinsey and from other organizations, is that those who identify as men, as entrepreneurs, tend to have a higher incident rate of mental health issues, mainly from hiding it.
Mainly from hiding it. Interesting. There's another question here. So as an autistic founder with an 80% neurodivergent staff, One challenge we encounter as a startup are with the social nuances involved in raising capital. Are there resources available to bridge this gap, and or are there angels, VCs aware of the prevalence of the neurodivergence in founders?
The answer is no.
Yeah,
Um,
really great question.
Yeah, it's an incredible question because it opens up to that investors, and I'm going to be being very blunt, I think investors only care about mental health when the business they're investing in is about mental health. And that's a pretty blunt comment, but that's how I feel. I worked in the investment business for years. I don't think it has changed very much from what I have seen. And what private equity, what investors are looking for is return on their investment. What I think they're missing is that if you actually take a human approach to that, your return will be better. You'll be more likely to see a return. You know, and that's something we don't look at because it is just there's no way that an entrepreneur seeking capital, there's no way that they're not going to experience stress. And no question, there's going to be some level of anxiety, which is going to get out of hand. So by pretending it's not there and ignoring it is making it worse. So sadly, the answer to the question asked is that the answer is no. I think we need to just be much more open about it, and for investors to shift from this short-term focus they have to a longer-term building. And what do they need to do to help someone who's got just a great idea, a great product, a great service? How do we help them, live in a healthy way so they can make it happen?
I think a lot of the source of some of that pain comes back to the destigmatization, of the system, right? And the things that we can do to really remove those perceptions of, what people with mental illness can actually do, and what the preconceptions are, which are really awful when you actually think about them. And they're reinforced time and time again through the media, and it's just it's incredible. And I think when you really spend a little bit of time thinking about it, or you have lived experience, it becomes quite obvious that that is a definite barrier to some of the progress in this area.
I know I was offered a large project, and I asked the client, I said, do you worry at all about me? And his comment was, no, you'll deliver. He said, we're all dealing with our own things. So you just talk about it. And said, I'll know you'll deliver. And I did. And this is one of the biggest things I try to put out there is that, because I have PTSD does not mean that I'm less, in fact, I'm more creative. I think I'm more productive now because I'm much more open and honest. I find I have better relationships with clients. They're much more, much more honest. And, everyone, I find now, everyone knows, but we don't, have big conversations about it. It's not an issue. That's where we need to get to. I always get this feeling like when someone says, you have such courage, we've got to stop having to have courage to talk about mental health.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
It just needs to be something we can talk about.
Right. So I'm not this is not in the chat, but it's something that just popped up for me. As you know, this role for me at CMH Nova Scotia is relatively new, and I've spent the bulk of my career in the for-profit sector, and so I've got a foot firmly planted in all of these worlds. And so, what's the role that CMHA Nova Scotia can play in kind of supporting the business community and reducing stigma, do you think?
Oh, I think bringing the conversation. Having this conversation. And if we saw some of the leading organizations here, let's say in Nova Scotia, posting on LinkedIn about having CMHA in and having the conversation at the senior level around mental health and looking at how they can provide an environment that is supportive of people who have mental illness and reducing the stigma through awareness. that is what I think CMHA could play such a role in. And if we saw 12 leading companies post that they did that and make that start, that would start shifting some land.
Yeah. Challenge accepted. Hey, there's a couple of there's not necessarily a question here, but I just it's coming back to some of the comments you made around the startup community and the state of mental health in that space. And someone's posted, so much of pitching is talking about things that aren't quite real, as if they are real. It's forced, but deception accepted as a social norm, which is kind of exactly what you were talking about, right? Yeah,
no, I just think it's a tough environment. And plus, like, to bring your, like, in a minute or 2 minutes, like, to bring your idea forward, describe it, and then be, like, criticized or critiqued by this group of people. I'm not sure that's a really healthy way to assess an idea, to see whether it has a future. I just think there's it's turned into entertainment, and that's not what it should be. We're trying to help people build businesses. If we want to have contests, I think they should be about innovative concepts, not about entrepreneurial businesses. Like, if you're going to invest in building a business, I think there should be a more thoughtful approach to it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one sort of technical question that came up, and that was, what was your sample size when you were doing this research? Can you talk a little bit about the background to where those data points came from?
469 in Nova Scotia, and it was almost evenly split 50-50, male, female. We had a good distribution of size of company. It almost matched the actual market. So yeah, that's where we were.
Excellent. And Ben has another great kind of comment that you may be able to sort of build upon. He says the big challenge that entrepreneurs create is that entrepreneurs create unpredictability in government's business model, in that the entrepreneur does not pay payroll taxes, but at the same time the entrepreneur generates payroll taxes through the employment of others. This conflicted position of being the tax collector that minimizes tasks is not a sustainable business model, and we've been foolish to think it is. Have any thoughts around that?
Yes. Again, I felt, anyway, the system is so I'm just thinking of one thing. I paid a really large HST bill last year, but didn't have net income. Like, we're still startup, still moving through, but yet I paid a lot of salary. So, like, it wasn't like I wasn't investing or working in the business. It's just, I think, where Ben is going is that we need to really look at the system in terms of how entrepreneurs are taxed. And I'm not saying to get a lower tax rate, but I'm saying to get a fair tax rate, where things actually make sense. We pay payroll tax, but then we have to pay HST when we don't even have a profit.
Right.
That makes no sense to me.
Right.
I know it's supposed to encourage us to buy products and services, but yet I hope that by investing in people, that's probably the best we can do for the economy.
Yeah. I think, and it sounds like a question that, how does that impact mental health? Well, it creates a system that makes it difficult to really focus on the things that should be a priority when you're worrying about all of these other things. Right?
Yeah, there's always this comment that, pay yourself first. That doesn't happen. Like, in real life, that doesn't happen. We have to help the business first survive, and then be able to get up on its feet and move, and then hopefully thrive. And during that time, we have to make exceptions, which means, I really need the team, so they're paid first.
Right.
I'm not. And that really wears on your outlook in life a lot. And this is why I'm saying, like, if someone is starting a business and there's going to be an investment in that through government or from other source, I think one of the best things they could do is provide some type of financial payment to the entrepreneur for like a 3-year period, just to take that stress away. I'm lucky and different that I'm in a place where I've worked for a lot of years, so I'm using my own assets to cover me. But to be honest, that doesn't feel good. You know, like, and we'll get there. Like this year, we've definitely made a profit, and it's growing from here. But like in those 3 years or so, that's really wearing on your self-esteem and how you feel about things. Yeah, it's a big topic.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. I think we're about to wrap up here, but I wanted to really thank you, Michael. It's always fun riffing with you and talking about these things because, you know, obviously it's a space that I'm working in, but personally, I do believe that when we can shift these conversations, that's when the world will become a better place to live. And so, I've learned lots as well. Every time I talk to you, I learn a lot. But I think, you know, the thing to remember is that as leaders, we have the opportunity here to really make a difference. And I would guess that, you know, most people that listen to this conversation do have a voice inside that says, yes, I'm ready for this. And I'm really hoping that this conversation will give them permission to do the same and go out into the world and really be on that mission to reduce the stigma so that we can show up more fully as ourselves and impact our business more completely as well. So thank you so much for your vulnerability and just showing up in such a real way. It makes such impact. And I don't know if you realize that, but it does. It gives everyone else permission to do the same. So thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts to share as we go out into the world and try and make a difference?
I don't think I ever have a final thought. So it's like an ongoing roller. I think, you know, what I would leave people with is two things. First, take care of yourself, which means have some self-compassion about doing the things that will support your energy. And that does include talking to other people. The second thing is to really understand the context of the people around you. So first and foremost, take care of yourself. Secondly, find out what the impact has been on the people around you, and then you can make really informed decisions to go from there.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Michael. It's an important conversation, a really, really important conversation. And Michael, I want to thank you so much for being so honest during the conversation, and thank you, Karen, for the great hosting and great questions. It's great to see people being vulnerable, putting their comments out there. Certainly, we had lots of comments in the chat as well from people who were reacting and commenting, Michael, on your thoughts. Thank you for your honesty. I think we are moving past the stigma. I think this is the kind of conversation that we need to have on a regular basis. And Michael, when I heard you say the client that you were engaged with, and you asked him if he had a problem or if he had a concern, and he said no. I mean, it's a simple answer, but it's the right answer. And I think we all know it's the right answer. So thanks for sharing that today. A huge thank you to Medavie Blue Cross for making today's event happen. I want to remind everybody we're hosting an in-person networking event tomorrow. In person, doesn't that sound exciting? At the Dartmouth Adult Services Center, or DASC, in Burnside. And I always get the time wrong. So, but it's about 4:30. I think I always get there late. So Sandra can put the right time in the chat, but I know it'll be about 4:30. So there we go. She put the link, so we can all sign up. And we're going to have more business after hours. And the new year is coming. I know we haven't yet made it to December, but the new year is coming. You know, there's lots of great things to look forward to as we move forward. So thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you very much again, Karen. Thank you, Michael. And I look forward to seeing everyone again. We have recorded this, so if you would like to pass this on to your friends or coworkers, please, I encourage you to do that. I expect you'll get an email within a day or so with a link so that you can pass this on directly. So thanks, everyone. thank you very much and look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.
See you.